and that's on October 16th here at Northside.
So now our introduction of Dr. Paul Kengor. It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote here at Northside. So now our introduction of Dr. Paul Kengor. It is my great pleasure to introduce
our City College. I could have had so many adjectives. Where he also serves as the executive director of the Institute of Faith and Freedom. He's widely recognized for his incisive analysis of cultural, political, and spiritual issues, particularly those intersecting faith and ideology. Dr. Kengor has authored over 20 books, including The Devil and Karl Marx, A Pope and a President, The Devil and Bella Dodd, and his latest work exploring the phenomenon of the stigmatists, which we'll hear more about the devil tonight. Bella Dodd. His writings have appeared in major publications like the Wall Street Journal. Have you read that? Of the stigmatists. Yeah. National Review, the USA Today, and he is a frequent commentator on radio and television, bringing clarity, honestly, to the most complex issues, and yet the USA Today, and he is a frequent commentator on radio and television, bringing clarity, honestly, to the most complex issues, the USA Today, and theological insight. I took his book, The Devil and Karl Marx, with me to Revelations, or it's on Marxism and communism and this whole culture of wokeism and all of its challenges that we've been experiencing. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Kengor. This whole culture of wokeism and all of its challenges that we've been experiencing. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Kengor.
Thank you, Vicki. Very kind. Wow, very kind. Don't believe anything she said. None of that's true. None of it's true. And the Devil and Karl Marx for vacation reading? Gee, thank you, Vicki. Man, I'll tell you, you probably wanted to drown yourself in the pool. Don't believe anything she said. That is an ugly book. I mean, of course, you feel like taking a bath. And the Devil and Karl Marx for vacation reading? Gee, man, I'll tell you, you probably wanted to drown yourself after reading it. But no, it's great to be back here. I love Indianapolis. It's one of my favorite cities. I was born in Pittsburgh, so Pittsburgh's like my hometown. I teach at Grove City College. It's great to be back here. I love Western Pennsylvania. My hometown, I was telling Steve earlier, Steve is from Ambridge. My hometown is Butler, Pennsylvania, which is, I know, I used to say all the time, well, I'm from Butler, Pennsylvania. My hometown, I was telling Steve earlier, so I knew a lot of people who were there that day when that happened. I know, I used to say all the time, well, I'm from Butler, Pennsylvania, was there that day. I was going to cover it for the American Spectator. I knew I decided at the last minute, it's going to be really hot. I don't like to go to rallies. And my friend Jeff Lord said, hey, watch it on Newsmax. They're covering the whole thing, and your son is going. You could talk to him. And my wife said, our son John, right? She said, you think it's okay to let him go? And I said, well, yeah, sure. I mean, come on. I mean, there hasn't been anybody, the president hasn't been shot since Reagan, March 30th, 1981. But I got to tell you, though, I had this feeling. We both just had this kind of bad feeling. And watching it on TV, Newsmax live at that moment, and those bullets started, and my wife just fell to her knees and just started praying. And we froze the TV screen to see if we could see where our son was, because you knew that those bullets had to hit somebody, right? I mean, it was just a wall of flesh around the president. And I was texting my son kind of furiously in caps, trying to write, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" We didn't get a response for about 20 minutes or so because they had scrambled all the cell service. But just a scary moment. Yeah, we knew the president was okay pretty much right away, right? And in fact, amid my anxiety, when Trump stood up and I said to my wife, he just said, "Fight, fight, fight. You should see this," right? But but a scary moment. But so I'm from Butler, Pennsylvania, but I love coming out here to Indianapolis, and this is a great organization. I mean, what could be better in a title of an organization than Corpus Christi, right? And unity and peace. And in fact, our new American Pope, that was quite literally his first message from the Loggia last week, right? So he said in kind of flawless Italian, "La pace sia con tutti voi," right? Peace be with you all, which were the words of Jesus to the disciples when they were hiding there in the upper room. In fact, Jesus said that twice, and our American Pope said, "Peace be with you all," twice. And at this moment in time in the history of the church and in the world, we need peace and unity right now, right? So I'm very prayerful for that, very prayerful for that, hopeful for that. All right, so I got my card here. We got quite an agenda, right? The next 12, 14 hours. I'm going to be a busy man. So we have today we're talking about the stigmatists this evening, and then tomorrow confronting Marxism, confronting wokeism. You'll hear a lot about Our Lady of Fatima tomorrow in my talks tomorrow. But tonight, so the Stigmatists, this is my most recent book. It was released through Tan Books last September. In fact, September 17th, 2024, which was the 800th anniversary of St. Francis receiving the stigmata. So that's the date that we decided to pick for the release. It is believed, I've always been fascinated by stigmatists. When I was not Catholic, when I was agnostic, if not atheist, I still had seen pictures of people like Padre Pio. I had seen video. I mean, I was a science major. I was a pre-med major in college at University of Pittsburgh. So I knew to study evidence and actually keep your mind open, do scientific investigation. And I had read about Padre Pio and some others, and I knew that these people had been scrutinized by everyone from Vatican officials and the local bishop to psychiatrists and psychologists and medical doctors. And I heard of cases like Padre Pio of this guy bleeding from his hands and his feet for 50 years. And you can't fake that. I mean, that's impossible to fake, right? I mean, imagine trying to continuously bleed from your hands and shoving a screwdriver in your hand. No one can do that to themselves, especially in both hands when it's so hard. Padre Pio couldn't even totally form his fingers around the Eucharist. He had to sort of hold it between his fingers because he couldn't completely close his hand all the way. So this phenomenon exists in modern times. I had known that St. Francis was the first, reputed to be the first. And if he had been the last one 800 years ago, we would probably say, that's all kind of, to quote Vladimir Lenin, medieval superstition, right? And there's no way. That happened 800, no one really believes that. But there were more and more stigmatists in the 20th century than we think at any other time in the history of humanity. They seem to be more frequent, which in itself is an interesting question. It probably means that, I think it means that heaven, God, right, heavenly forces are sending us these physical signs, these manifestations for a skeptical age that is now 2,000 years removed from the time of the apostles. So we're at a period where, to quote what Thomas said, Thomas the apostle, in the upper room, right? He said, unless I actually see the holes in his hands, right, and go up to him and stick my fingers in them, then I won't believe. So for us today to see these living crucifixes, as they've been called, we need those miracles today. I would point as well to, with Vicky mentioning Our Lady of Fatima, Marian apparitions are a new thing historically. You go back to pretty much Our Lady of Guadalupe, jump forward to Bernadette, Lourdes, that's in the 1800s, Fatima, several consecutive months on the 13th, in the year 1917, and then into today, even things to, I mean, there was a Marian apparition in Egypt about 40 or 50 years ago. So these things are more common now than they were maybe the year 800, 900. In terms of Francis, it's believed if Francis wasn't the first, then we think it was actually St. Paul himself. And if you read Galatians 6:17, Paul says, I bear in my body the markings of Christ, or stigmata in Greek. And two of the stigmatists that I'll talk about, Anne Catherine Emmerich and Teresa Newman, both German women, nuns, both fairly modern. In fact, Teresa Newman died in the 1960s. They were probably two of the most remarkable visionaries in the history of the church. You guys, I'll talk about Anne Catherine Emmerich pretty soon, but she was the inspiration for which film? Passion of the Christ. Passion of the Christ. So she and Therese Newman could both see things that happened in the past. And Anne Catherine Emmerich dictated these to Clemens Brentano, her writer, and she could see visions of things in the life of Jesus when Jesus was a child, in the life of the Blessed Mother when she was a child, and the apostles. And both Anne Catherine Emmerich and Therese Newman told their spiritual directors that they had seen the apostles, they had a number of different stories about them, and that they had seen as well St. Paul. And neither of them knowing the other, because they were about 150, 200 years apart, both of them separately told their spiritual director, they said, I've seen Paul. I saw him walking around, and oh, Father, he was the first stigmatist because he was bleeding from his hands. So independently, they both said the same thing. And they both also claimed to have seen St. Francis. So you jump from the first century all the way up to the 13th century with Francis. And for whatever reason, there don't seem to be any in that period, but they start again with Francis. And again, I think that's because it's more modern times. Some people have said, well, maybe there were stigmatists in the year 800, but we just don't know about it. No, you would know about it. Because when these people started bleeding from their hands and from their feet, word got around. They usually tried to hide it because they were all humble. None of them were out there in the piazza and the public square. Look at me, look how great I am, right? Look at my markings, I'm like Jesus. Most of them tried to hide it, but of course they couldn't. And the priests would come in and the bishops would come in. So everybody wanted to see them. Everybody wanted to know about them. Them, how many in total? Probably about 400 to 500 stigmatists in history that we know of. About 400 to 500. Yeah. Yeah, does it seem like a lot? People sometimes think it's a lot. Others, how many people have lived? I mean, probably 10 billion, right? I mean, 10 to 20 billion. I don't know. But so in the history of humanity, that's not that big of a number. But we think probably about 400 to 500. Of those, the vast majority have been women. 90%. 90%. And when you consider that the most famous stigmatists are men, Francis, Padre Pio, perhaps St. Paul, maybe it's a little surprising that the vast majority have been women. But I write in the book, I talk about that different people have been quoted on that. One authority said, well, women seem more capable of loving more while they're suffering than men do. And also, my wife was like, yeah, you bet, man. It's absolutely right? She always says to me, you tried childbirth, okay? I mean, I hurt my shoulder. She's like, you're such a wimp. You know, I've had this shoulder injury for like a year. I put a heating pad on this. But one doctor told me, he said, well, women do have a higher pain threshold than men do. And so maybe that might be part of it as well. Also, if there's a particular country of origin, more have come from Italy than any other country, about 70%. About 70%. So the kind of classic profile of a stigmatist kind of demographically, gender would be an Italian woman, maybe somebody like St. Catherine of Siena, that gal right there. And in fact, Catherine of Siena right there that is the crucifix in front of which she received the stigmata. She actually received the stigmata in Pisa. And she's from Siena. That crucifix in which she received it in Pisa is now at the church in Siena. One of my kids, Mitch, was actually there last summer and sent me pictures of the crucifix. All right, so I'm going to go through a few of these here today. And here is, all right, who are these for? Padre Pio, St. Francis, Gemma Galgani, nice. And of course, Catherine of Siena. So a definition: stigmatists are physical marks provided to the suffering soul, as they've been called, as both a reflection and participation in the sacrificial passion of Jesus Christ. The marks are bleeding wounds bestowed upon the so-called victim's soul as a spiritual gift. And by the way, they consider it, these people, they're humble, it's painful, they're suffering, but because of where they're coming from, I mean, these people are at a different spiritual level than most of us, all right? They consider it a gift. I mean, me personally, I'd be like, can you give me like levitation or something, all right? That'd be pretty cool, right? Yeah, let me do that. Bilocation would be pretty cool, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, I'd go for that. But bleeding from the hands, no way. That's why I would never be a stigmatist. I'm never going to choose me, I'll tell you that. As a spiritual gift to singular individuals, all right, who seem to be distinctly willing to surrender themselves for the sins of others, as their Lord did on Calvary. And a common characteristic that I see with a lot of them is usually there was a lot of physical suffering and emotional and spiritual suffering in their lives before they received the stigmata. Almost as if heaven was saying, I want to see if you've got the spiritual mettle here to go further, right? You're able to do that, you're able to do this, and these people get to the point where they're like, I should point out here, I'm a convert to the Catholic faith. Actually, I'm technically a revert, but I'm really a convert because when I was Catholic when I was younger, I was never really Catholic. But Catholics have the phrase, offer it up, right? People here get that. Remember when I first came back into the church and I heard a bunch of older ladies at the church talking, and one was talking about her pains, and the other lady said, well, offer it up. And I had to jump in. I said, what does that mean? Offer it up. I don't get it. And they said, well, offer up your suffering. Give it to God. Ask him, ask Jesus, ask that guy on the crucifix that we have in our Catholic churches. My Protestant churches, it was an empty cross, right? You go into the Catholic church and you think of the crucified Jesus. A lot of Protestants will say, brother, the cross is empty. He's not laying on the cross. He's risen, brother. He's risen indeed. We know, we get it. But for a Catholic, you bring your suffering into Mass every Sunday or every day. And whereas this is very common in Protestantism, why do bad things happen to good people, right? Why, God? Why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? The Catholic doesn't usually have to ask that. They walk in and they see the suffering Jesus on the crucifix all the time. So they walk in with whatever child they have who's suffering, a loved one who just died, and they look and they think, oh yeah, well look what Jesus went through. And there's an acronym in evangelical circles, WWJD, what would Jesus do? He would suffer. He would suffer. And he told us, if you want to follow me, what does it say in the Bible? Pick up your cross and follow me. It doesn't say if you want to follow me, then get a nice 401k all set up. Get that nice vacation already, and man, you're going to make $1 million, and it's going to be all perfect. Nothing bad's going to happen to you, right? But so Catholics have this kind of charism, this willingness to suffer. We have nuns who go into convents and do nothing but pray for the sins of the world. And I know some of my Protestant friends would say, well, Jesus alone can save. Well, yeah, but he calls on us to pray. He has doctors and first responders and nurses who help in his ministry of healing. He could heal all of you if he wants to, right? But he doesn't. He has Padre Pio would have people come to him and say, Padre Pio, can you tell me, I've got this physical problem. Am I going to live? Am I going to survive? And in one case, Padre Pio said, okay, yes, you're going to survive, but Jesus wants you to have the surgery. Why? Just for whatever reason. Maybe to glorify the work of the doctor, to have people around you participate in your healing, and maybe for you to suffer for a little bit and worry for a little bit. But that's all part of offering it up. So these people have a unique sort of charism. They're willing to offer it up, join their suffering with Jesus to help for the expiation of sins in the world, of the sins of the world. Now, again, my former Protestant evangelical mindset, right? Are you saying that the sacrifice of Christ on the cross is insufficient? Only Jesus can save, right? I know, but also he calls on us to be living sacrifices, right? To join our suffering with his. So for whatever reason, he wants us to be part of this. All right. St. Francis of Assisi. So in the book, I have, and I'm sorry I didn't bring copies of the book, but I'm cleaned out of copies, all right? But in the book, I talk about 8 different stigmatists, and I'll give you just a few words on each of them. So Francis of Assisi, born in either 1181 or 1182, died October 3rd, 1226. So he received the stigmata at Laverna, which was a mountain in Tuscany, Italy, September 17th, 1224. He went there on a 40-day retreat, which he would do every year at the period of the exaltation of the cross. He had already suffered a lot in his life. I mean, this was a guy who did severe penance, severe mortification. By the way, my students, I teach at a largely Protestant college. And when I talk about guys like this, I write the word mortification on the board because they don't know that phrase. They don't know what that is. And I'm encouraged to see more and more in Protestant evangelical circles, a lot of them now honoring Lent and even doing ashes, right? Because they understand more of the sacrificial nature of being a Christian. But he goes there, and he's already done so much mortification to the point where the church after Francis would have to tell some of these orders, look, don't do that much mortification because we don't want you to die, all right? Don't starve yourself to death. But he was willing all the time to sacrifice, fast for the sake of Jesus. So he receives the stigmata September 17th, 1224. So at that point, he's roughly, do the math, about 43 years old, right? 42, 43 years old. He would only have stigmata for 2 years. Died October 3rd, 1226. When he passed, the head of the order, Brother Elias, who was now the head of what had been, so at that point, Francis called his group the Friars Minor. So they became known as the Franciscans. And they got recognized in Italy, in Rome, by the Pope at the time, as did the Dominican order as well. So when he died October 4th, 1226, Brother Elias releases an encyclical letter, kind of like a press release. This would be like a 13th century press release, telling the world, I announce to you a great joy, a miracle of a new kind. One has never heard tell of a similar wonder in the world except in the person of the Son of God, Christ our Lord. Indeed, a little before his death, our brother and father, Francis, appeared as if crucified, bearing in his body the 5 wounds which are truly the stigmata of Christ. In fact, his hands and feet had had something like perforations made by the nails, front and back, that retained scars and showed the blackness of the nails. As to his side, he seemed to be pierced, and blood often flowed out. His first biographer, Thomas of Celano, would also write, Francis's hands and feet seemed to be actually pierced by nails, with the heads of the nails appearing in the palms of his hands and on the upper sides of his feet, the points appearing on the other side. So picture this. He doesn't just have holes in his hands and feet. He actually had nails coming out of him. The marks were round on the palm of each hand, but elongated on the other side. And small pieces of flesh jutting out from the rest took on the appearance of the nail ends, bent and driven back. Bent and driven back. Yeah, that's something here again. You can't do that to yourself. You can't fake that. In the same way, the marks of the nails were impressed on his feet and projected beyond the rest of the flesh. Moreover, his right side had a large wound as if it had been pierced with a spear, and it often bled so that his tunic and trousers were soaked with his sacred blood. So that was something that all the brothers knew about. Francis couldn't hide from them. People in Assisi knew about it. And so at his death, as everybody gathered around, they finally let it go public and told the world about it. All right, that's Francis. Catherine of Siena, she's one of my favorites. Born March 25th, 1347, died April 29th, 1380. Died at the age of 33. There's a lot of female stigmatists who died at the age of 33. Same age as Jesus. Saint Faustina is another one who died at the age of 33. She received the stigmata in 1375 while praying in front of a crucifix in Pisa, Italy. In her case, the stigmata were hidden. She begged the Lord not to make them visible. Now, in most cases of stigmatists, they're visible, which is why everybody knows about it. But in a couple cases, in some cases, her case, also Saint Faustina. And bear in mind, they're saints. In fact, she's a doctor of the church. So that most of the stigmatists that I did chapters on in the book are either saints or blessed. So I picked people who were formally approved by the church. I didn't want to cover somebody who's claiming to have the wounds, who lives somewhere, wherever right now. I wanted to go with actual, authorized, officially approved cases. But in her case, she didn't want people to publicly see the wounds. She begged the Lord that they be concealed, that they be hidden. And so they were in her case. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. She's one of my favorites. So born September 1774 in Germany, died 1824. Yeah, 1824. So she was almost 50 years old when she died. First experienced the stigmata while bedridden in Germany in 1813. She, as well as Therese Newman, the stigmata were so painful they couldn't even get out of bed. Therese Newman got around more, but Anne Catherine Emmerich was bedridden for most of her years. It was so painful, and she bled so much all the time. And new rounds of doctors would continue to come in, more skeptics over and over and over again. She finally got to a point where she said, enough, get them out of here. They want to come in, they want to cover up my wounds, make sure I'm not faking it again. It hurts when they cover them up. I mean, Padre Pio, one of the skeptics with Padre Pio, Cardinal Gemelli, who really tormented Padre Pio, wanted to put a cast over his leg to see if he was faking it or not. But she eventually got to the point where she said, out, I've had enough of it. But both she and Therese Newman had a condition also known as spiritual anedia. They hardly ever ate. And in Therese Newman's case, for the last 4 decades of her life, she ate only the Eucharist, nothing else. Nothing else. Drank some water, ate the Eucharist. Catherine of Siena, same way. If they tried to eat anything else, and Therese Newman's modern, died in the early 1960s. Anne Catherine Emmerich had all these German doctors and scientists around them. They would try to make them eat, and they would vomit it up if it wasn't the Eucharist. So that prayer, give us this day our daily bread, that quite literally was their daily bread. That's all they had. Anything else? Anything else, they There's no way that she could have known any of that, making that prediction 150 years earlier. I mean, a lot of people will make predictions and very rarely affix a time to them, right? But she's told that Satan will be unchained from the floor of hell 50 to 60 years before that happens. Now, here again is the Protestant in me who says, oh, come on, that's just this German lady's vision. I mean, Satan chained to the floor of hell. Where's that in the Bible? Revelation 20, 1 through 3. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years and threw him into the pit, and shut it and sealed it over him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be loose for a little while. Revelation 27. When the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be loosed from his prison. Now, we don't know exactly when that would be in the scriptures, but she gave us a period of 50 to 60 years before the year 2000 in the early 1800s. All right, that's Anne Catherine Emmerich. For me, too, I should add here that the stigmata, I take these visions of these people seriously. In fact, that's what really convinced me to do the book, is I noticed that most of these stigmatists are visionaries that had prophecies, many of which speak to our day and that haven't been fulfilled yet. And for me, the fact that, I mean, if my neighbor down the street is claiming to talk to the Virgin Mary, right, or claiming that this is going to happen 50 to 60 years or whatever, my friend Jim, right, and tells me he's out cutting his lawn on his John Deere and he's talking to the Virgin Mary, I'd come home and tell my wife and say, hey, Susan, I think Jim's really losing it. He thinks he's talking to the Virgin Mary. But if Jim starts bleeding from his hands and then from his feet, and in some cases like these stigmatists, it happens like clockwork only on Thursday, ramps up on Good Friday. The guy can barely move, like he's on the rack by 3 o'clock on Friday. Kind of slows down after that. Saturday morning, no marks at all. He's out there cutting the lawn again. Teams of scientists are coming in. The Vatican's showing up. All right, now I'm taking Jim seriously. Now I'm taking his visions seriously. Okay, another. St. Gemma Galgani. It's one of my favorites. 1878, she was born, died in 1903. The exact years of the pontificate of Leo XIII, by the way, 1878 to 1903. She received the stigmata in Lucca, Italy, June 8th, 1899. What's so fascinating about this young Italian girl is she was really assaulted by the devil and demons. The other one who's like that is Padre Pio. Padre Pio would get beat up in his cell every night, and you could hear screaming from his cell. And toward the end of his life, he got to a point where he would beg other friars to sleep in the room with him, because then usually the devil wouldn't physically attack him. I mean, the devil would be there, and the other person couldn't see him, but Pio could see him. And it was still frightening, but he wouldn't be attacked as much. And you would think that the devil might be more of a gentleman and wouldn't do that to a little girl, right? But the devil ain't no gentleman. She would get beat up all the time. And people would come in the room and see her being dragged across the floor by some invisible force by her hair. Her spiritual director was Father Germano, and she told Father Germano this about the attacks of the devil. Today I thought I was to be entirely free from that nauseous animal, but instead he has knocked me about greatly. I had gone to bed with the full intention of sleeping, but it turned out otherwise. He began with certain blows that made me fear I should die. He was in the shape of a big black dog and put his paws on my shoulders and hurting me greatly. I felt it so much in all my bones that sometimes I thought they were broken. Also, when I was taking holy water, he wrenched my arm so violently that I fell from the pain. The bone was dislocated, but went back because Jesus touched it for me, and all was remedied. In one case, she said a demon comes in and takes her diary and is shouting at her, war, war, war. War, a lack of peace. Here's another one she told Father Germano. Once more I had passed a bad night. The demon came before me as a giant of great height. He beat me fiercely all night, and he kept saying to me, for thee there is no more hope of salvation. I replied that God is merciful and that I feared nothing. He then gave me a hard blow on the head and shouted in rage, accursed, and he disappeared. I went to my room to rest a little, and there I found him. He began again to strike me with a knotted rope and kept on because he wanted me to listen to him while he suggested wickedness. I said no, and he struck harder, and he knocked my head violently against the ground. At a certain moment, it came to my mind to invoke Jesus' Holy Papa, which was the name that she used for the Eternal Father. I called aloud, God, Eternal Father, through the most precious blood, free me. I don't quite know what happened. The contemptible beast dragged me violently from my bed and threw me, dashing my head against the floor with such force that it pains me still. I became senseless and remained lying there until I came to myself a long time afterwards. Jesus be thanked. So she would usually get relief from Jesus or a guardian angel. Pio did as well. So did Anne Catherine Emmerich. So did Faustina. They could see their guardian angel. So Pio would actually say, and Anne Catherine Emmerich too, Pio would say this to his fellow friars. He would say, you don't talk to the Blessed Mother? You don't see your guardian angel? They're like, no, dude, never talked to the Blessed Mother before. I don't see my guardian angel. And Pio said, well, surely you're just being humble. That's false humility. They said, no, I don't, I've never talked to the Blessed Mother. So they had these kind of visions since they were kids. And oftentimes, Jesus would allow, heaven would allow, Pio, like Gemma Galgani, to take these beatings. Guardian angel would appear 6 hours later, and Pio would be like, oh, thanks a lot. Where were you last night, huh? Right? But for whatever reason, they allowed him to suffer. All this time, they're offering up their suffering for the forgiveness of the sins of the world. Now, in her case, what's interesting about Gemma Galgani, ask any, well, not about any, but there have been a half a dozen major books by modern exorcists. And you can find some of this online. Different exorcists are out there that have podcasts. She has become a powerful intercessor during exorcisms by priests that have particularly difficult cases of diabolical infestation. And in fact, they call her the woman in black. And in one case, the demon says, oh no, she's here, right? The stigmatist, the woman in black. When they first said the woman in black, he's like, who? Who's the woman in black? The Blessed Mother? And the demon says, no, Gemma Galgani. I hate her. She's disgusting. I hate her. So if you wonder, why is she doing this? What's she being prepared for? Well, today, for a heavenly ministry of interceding against evil, against demons. All right, that's St. Gemma. Padre Pio. We talk a lot about Padre Pio. I'll give you just a few different insights on him. So born May 25th, 1887, Pietrelcina, Italy. Died September 23rd, 1968. Received the stigmata September 20, 1918 at the choir loft in San Giovanni Rotondo. He was there alone. He had done what he often did, prayed to the Lord said, Lord, what can I do? What can I do to suffer for the sins of the world? And at that point, the deadliest war in history had raged for 4 years with no end in sight, World War I. So he goes into San Giovanni Rotondo and he goes to the chapel. He's like, Lord, what can I do? How can I offer myself to try to end this war? Right? What can I do? And all of a sudden, he's there in front of the cross, and just, it's like rays of light, bam, through his hands, through his feet. And he looks and he's like, no, Lord, no, 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 Lord, I'm not worthy. No, don't do this. Don't do this. He's alone. He's in so much pain, of course. People would ask Padre Pio, does that hurt? It's like, yeah, it hurts. Of course it hurts. So he dragged himself back to his cell. He has to walk on his elbows and his knees. Can't walk on his hands. Can't walk on his feet. So when he would walk, people who watched him at Mass said he would descend the altar kind of backwards on his heels because he couldn't walk in a normal way. So he goes back to his cell. The fellow friars come in and they see a blood trail to his cell, and they start banging on the door. Are you okay? Go away, go away. Open up, Francesco. This is his real name, right? Open up, Francesco. Go away, go away. So they get the superior, and he comes in, and he says, Francesco, under order of obedience, I demand you open the door. And he walked in, and he could see the blood from his hands. Pio did a sworn deposition about this with a Vatican apostolic visitor, June 15th, 1921, where he explains precisely how it happened. Father Mortimer Carty, who was the first American priest to write a biography of Pio, he observed him, he watched him, he met him, and actually shook his hand, saw the bleeding wounds himself. And he said this about Pio's wounds. The wounds on his feet present the same characteristic as the hands. A wound on top of the foot corresponds with a wound on the bottom of his foot. The stockings were always stained with blood on the top and on the bottom. Different from the other Capuchins who wear sandals, Padre Pio wore shoes, but special shoes that were flexible, soft, and partially made of cloth. They were sent to him as a gift from Switzerland. In descending the altar steps to give communion to the faithful, he appeared to me to step down backwards because of the intense pain in his feet. His gait was always uncertain, slow, hesitating. The stigma on his side was the strangest of all, because it emitted a greater quantity of blood, even though the wounds seemed more superficial. By the way, probably any doctors, nurses would probably make more sense, right? So the wound in the side would bleed more than maybe from the bottom of his feet, from his hands. He lost about a cup of blood each day from the wound in his left side. Once Dr. Festa, Giorgio Festa, applied a clean white handkerchief to the left side of Padre Pio at 9 in the evening. After 10 hours, at 7 the next morning, Dr. Festa found completely saturated with blood and serum not only that handkerchief, but also another cloth of equal size, which Padre Pio had applied above the handkerchief during the night. So there's all kinds of testimonies. Dr. Festa wrote this. In the palm of the left hand, corresponding to half of the third metacarpus, bone from the carpus to the fingers, there is an anatomic lesion of the tissues in circular form with clear margins, about 4/5 of an inch in diameter. There are these doctors' accounts for almost all these stigmatists. These aren't just legends, all right? People examine them. There is about 4/5 of an inch in diameter. The lesion was covered with a reddish-brown scab. Padre Pio affirmed that from time to time the scab detached itself first at the edges and then little by little toward the center until it fell off completely. Now, some of these stigmatists, as I said, would bleed like clockwork Thursday, Friday, stop on Saturday. He bled continuously nonstop for 50 consecutive years. Then the lesion appeared in all its detail with dark red color and always bleeding. Because of the presence of the scab, it was not easy to judge the profundity of the wound. The provincial superior who visited him shortly after the stigmatization had the clear impression that the wounds observed on the palms of each hand went right through to meet or join the wound on the back of the hand. Amazing stuff. And yet, he said the greatest torment that he faced was not the physical suffering of the wounds, not the attacks by the devil and demons, but by priests and clergy in the church who said he was faking it. The popes all stood by him, but they were being lobbied all the time by others who were saying that he was a faker. One of the, I think it was Gemelli who said this. He was a psychologist and thought he was really smart and was super condescending toward Padre Pio. He said, well, clearly he's not faking it because you can't fake this. But I figured out the cause. It is what we psychiatrists call autosuggestion. That's what's causing it. And Pio's like, autosuggestion. Well, tell him to imagine he's a bull. Let's see if he grows horns from his head, right? I mean, autosuggestion, right? Yeah, you could go ahead, everyone, try it, right? Right? For 50 years. And why would you even want to do that to yourself? As Pio said, it hurts. It hurts. In one case, this was as late as 1960. He still has people from the Vatican coming to doubt him. Two priests, Monsignor Carlo Maccari and his assistant Giovanni Barberini, who soon after this left the priesthood and got married. And they came in, they judged Pio, quote, a small and petty person, called him stupid, all these other things. Some of Pio's people around him said these two were puppets of Satan. They couldn't believe how cruel and crude and how nasty these guys were to Pio. They left and filed a report claiming that the bleeding 72-year-old friar, who had trouble walking, could not even close his hands, was having sex twice a week with a mistress named Clinicia Morcaldi. And Pio was so sickened and saddened by that and cried and said, first of all, I'm a virgin. Second of all, do you really think I could have sex with this woman or anyone twice a week? I can barely walk. I can barely stand up, right? There'd be blood all over her body. It's 1960. He's 73 years old. But that's the kind of thing that he went through. All right, how are we doing on time? All right.
Oh, yeah, we're
Doing good?
Yep.
All right. I don't have that many more. This is Blessed Elena Aiello. She's from Calabria, Italy. I found her fascinating. She's actually the longest chapter in my book. She's also very recent, died in the early 1960s. She caught my attention for a number of reasons, mainly because of her prophecies, 3 days of darkness, end times, ball of fire, chastisement from the sky, end times. In fact, who has that prophecy about the ball of fire, chastisement from the sky, October 13th, 1973, the anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima? Our Lady Agnes of Akita, who just died last summer. She was a stigmatist. People didn't know that. When she was having those visions, clergy against clergy, bishops against bishops, an infiltration of the church, cardinals against cardinals, we would be punished. Russia would be punished by a ball of fire from the sky. Our Lady of Akita, Sister Agnes Kasagawa from Japan, she was a stigmatist when she was having those visions. Elena Aiello had those as well. I'll wrap up with Faustina Kowalska. So she's one of my favorites. 1905, from Poland, died October 5th, 1938. What age? 33 years old. We're going to pray it tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the end of this. Divine Mercy. The Lord called her his secretary of mercy. You have Divine Mercy Sunday because of her. She's the first canonized saint of the new millennium by Pope John Paul II. He read her diaries, which had been suppressed for a while, and said, this is extraordinary stuff. She's in her 20s in Poland, wants to be a nun. Her parents are telling her no. So eventually she says, okay, I'll give up on that. She's at a dance with her sister, mid-1920s, kind of like the Roaring Twenties, even in Poland, because World War I is over. Poland is made a nation again. Poland was wiped off the map of the world from 1795 to 1918. As Karol Wojtyła, the future John Paul II, said, kept only alive by memory and identity, religion, the church, culture, poetry, literature. So she is, that's really, for you, those of you watching online, it's raining really hard right now. But the tornado passed, right, Ken? Right. All right, okay, good. By now. All right. So she is at a dance with her sister, and they're having a great time, kind of Roaring Twenties. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the dance floor, this should be a movie, right? Spins around and looks, and it's Jesus crucified. I think completely naked, or maybe wearing just like, a cloth, bleeding, beaten, looks at her. It's like the whole place freezes. No one else can see this, of course. All right. She also sees her guardian angel all the time. In her diary, at one point, she talks about riding from Vilnius, Lithuania, where she gets the Divine Mercy image, back to Poland, and her guardian angel is sitting next to her in the train the whole way. And at one point, she looks at a church, and apparently every church has a guardian angel on it. And they look up, and there's a guardian angel on the church, and her guardian angel looks at that guardian angel, and they both nod like, and then they just kind of go on. But that's the kind of stuff she could see. I mean, these people see the other world in a way that we don't, or that I don't. I'll tell you that. Maybe somebody else in there does. I don't. But she's there at that dance, and Jesus shows himself crucified in front of her, and he says, how long are you going to continue to put me off? How long are you going to continue to put me off? And he says, she goes, she sits down, tries to compose herself, and he tells her, I want you to go right now to Warsaw. I want you to become a nun. And she gets up and packs her bags and goes. She's staying with her uncle. Her uncle says, Faustina, Helena, what are you doing? This is going to break your parents' heart. She couldn't text him. She couldn't call him, right? You can't do this. You can't do this. She said, I have to go. I mean, you'd go too at that point, right? Jesus appears to you at a dance. So she went. She went and joins a convent. She had all sorts of, so she had hidden stigmata. If you read her diary, how many of you have read her diary? If you look, people miss the part about receiving the stigmata. But she talks about receiving the stigmata. She has a lot of prophecies in there that were given to her directly by Jesus, who told her to write these down for the world. So for that ocean of mercy that the world will need in preparation for the final days, for the end days. Jesus told her in August 1934, write this, before I come as the just judge, I am coming first as the King of mercy. Here's one of the slides. There will be given to people a sign in the heavens of this sort. Let me see, is that there or not? No. Okay. All right, but listen to this, visualize this, because maybe we'll live to see this. Because we're supposed to be in these days. First canonized saint of the new millennium, the year 2000. What year, I don't know. It's 2025 or 2055 or 2155, I don't know. But he told her, there will be given to people a sign in the heavens of this sort. All light in the heavens will be extinguished. and there will be a great darkness over the whole earth. Only Christ himself will penetrate the darkness. Then the sign of the cross will be seen in the sky, and from the openings where the hands and the feet of the Savior were nailed will come forth great lights, a picture of the divine mercy image, right? Coming from the hands, which will light up the earth for a period of time. This will take place shortly before the last day. She, like Elena Aiello and others, have visions of 3 days of darkness. In fact, Faustina used the phrase days of darkness. Elena Aiello said 70 hours of darkness, which comes out to almost exactly 3 days. Marie Julie Jeheni, who was a 3 days of darkness prophet, she likewise was a stigmatist. That 3 days of darkness and beeswax candles and all that stuff, if you look it up online, Wikipedia pops up, that's all credited to Blessed Anna Maria Taigi. She was a stigmatist. I didn't know that until I looked up. I'm like, wow, she's a stigmatist too. Jesus also told Faustina this in May 1935. It is you. You will prepare the world for my final coming. He told her March 25th, 1936. This is the Virgin Mary actually speaking to her. You have to speak to the world about his great mercy and prepare the world for the second coming of him who will come not as a merciful Savior, but as a just judge. Oh, how terrible is that day. Determined is the day of justice, the day of divine wrath. The angels tremble before it. Speak to the souls about this great mercy. Fear nothing. See, we know that she's the divine mercy prophet, right? Secretary. But why do we need divine mercy? Because you got to get it together before this happens. So the ocean of mercy is for sinners. And by the way, you don't help sinners by telling them they're not sinning. All right? They need to repent and change. December 1936, Jesus to Faustina. Speak to the world about my mercy. Let all mankind recognize my unfathomable mercy. It is a sign for the end times. Secretary of my mercy, write, tell souls about this great mercy of mine, because the awful day, the day of justice, is near. And he told her, out of Poland will come the spark for my second coming, signaling the second coming. And we don't know what exactly that is out of Poland. Could have been her, could have been this message, or could have been John Paul. I think it could have been John Paul, who comes from Poland as the only pope ever from Poland, the only Slavic pope ever, first non-Italian pope in 455 years, and becomes the pope who finds her diary, recognizes her as the first canonized saint of the new millennium, who gives this message of an ocean of mercy. So that might be it. And if that's the case, and all of this has just happened, and he died April 2nd, 2005, I find it hard to imagine that we're 500 years away from this, right? Yeah, Divine Mercy Sunday. He asked her, Jesus, to create a Divine Mercy Sunday, and who did it? John Paul II, who died April 2nd, 2005, the vigil feast of the Divine Mercy, of Divine Mercy Sunday. Pretty wild. Pretty wild. All right. So that's all I have right there. I'll take any questions that you have. Thank you. This is a more inspiring message, maybe, than the Devil and Karl Marx.
So please stand up so people can hear your question.
Hi. Yeah.
Have you studied Rosa Wise as she was a stigmatist?
Yes. And I wanted to cover her because she's in Canton, Ohio, which is not that far from where I live. Rhoda Wise. She was the spiritual mentor to Mother Angelica, the founder of EWTN. And go over there. I could pay homage to the Pittsburgh Steelers wing in the Hall of Fame in Canton while I'm over there. And then go, anyway, I was going to make a joke about the Indianapolis Colts and that, but I won't. I won't.
Let me just tell you about the Colts. George Weigel.
Yeah.
George is a big Colts fan.
Oh, is he?
Baltimore Colts.
Yeah, yeah.
He
Okay.
said the last time he was here, is he and Father Richard are going out to the church door to go to dinner. He looks at me and he says, "If there is no hell, where's Bob Ursay?"
Right, right. Amen to that. So, yeah, but Rhoda Wise, she's quite a case, and I understand they have on display gloves and all sorts of things. So I didn't cover her mainly because I wanted to stick with church-approved stigmatists. I've since been contacted, actually at the time that I was writing this book, by my editor, and after it came out a few months ago, by somebody who's an exorcist and does this stuff and knows of somebody who's near me, probably about 40 minutes from where I live.
Who's a stigmatist?
Yes, and asked me if I wanted to see the person, and I chickened out. I'm like, I don't know, man. They said, but you wrote the book on stigmatists. I'm like, yeah, but I'm dealing with church-approved saints, right? It would, to me, it's gotta. That would be think about it. It'd be a pretty shocking thing, wouldn't it? To walk in a room and see somebody. I should do it. I should take up the person on this. And,
You'll never forget it, because I
Right.
remember when I was 16, my mom would watch, somehow on TV, they were covering Padre Pio
yeah,
and the bleeding. And it still impacts me to this day because he was in my lifetime.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, he was really in the lifetime of most people in this room, right? I mean, I was born in 1966. He died in 1968. You go to Italy today, there are pictures, almost as many pictures of Padre Pio as there are of Jesus and the Blessed Mother, right? Because so many people, he was so famous. The co-patrons of Italy are Francis of Assisi and Catherine of Siena, but people in Italy lived in the time of this man who bled like that for 50 years. It's just undeniable. Yeah,
Go see her.
yeah, yeah.
Are there any laymen stigmatists in history?
Yes, yeah, and in fact, word is that some of the ones currently are laymen. Yeah, yeah, and there haven't been many that have been. I mean, some have been priests, but it's really pretty diverse. And this is interesting too. I think kind of befitting the universality of the Catholic Church, right? Catholic means universal. And Hilaire Belloc said the faith is Europe and Europe is the faith. So the Catholic faith used to be primarily in Europe, but now it's Africa, Asia. I mean, we thought with the last Pope we could have Tagle from the Philippines. We could have Robert Serra from Africa. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was from Latin America, Argentina. So for a while, most of the stigmatists were coming out of Europe. Number one country, Italy. Number two, France. Number three, Germany. But now you're getting more and more from, to borrow a term from Pope Francis, the periphery, from Asia, from North America, from different parts of the world. I think the more interesting question is, why doesn't our stinking media care about it, right? Yeah, I mean, all the time, 24/7, it's just political junk that they cover. Exactly. If there's some lady in Steubenville who's bleeding from her hands, I mean, send CNN over with a camera crews, right? And someone would say, well, then maybe she's not. I think it's more the fact that the media is just so diabolical that they don't even have any interest in things that are spiritual. Yeah, propaganda. I mean, to me, that's a lot more fascinating than the latest trip by the president to wherever, right? I mean, if something that's so supernatural that we have somebody in our lifetime bleeding from his or her hands and feet, I want to see that. I'd pay tickets to go watch that. Forget about $500 for a Super Bowl ticket, right? I'll go pay $500 to watch someone bleeding from their hands. Well, maybe not. As I said, I already chickened out. I had a chance to go for free and didn't even do it.
I think the patron saint of current media is Joseph Goebbels.
Yeah, right.
Have you studied St. Veronica Giuliani?
Yeah, I almost had a chapter on her. She's fascinating. She was a stigmatist. A whole bunch of them, Italian women from that era. Blessed Lucy of Narni, who Lucy of Narnia is based on. C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. Narnia is a village in Italy between Rome and Assisi. I drove right through it. And my guide, Fabrizio, said, Paul, this is Narnia, the guy, what is his name, the author, said, C.S. Lewis? Yeah, he wrote it about, like, you Italians think everything comes from Italy. I don't believe you, right? But no, Narni from Italy inspired Narnia, and Blessed Lucy, a stigmatist with an incredible story, she's the inspiration for Lucy of Narnia and the yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a devotion to the prayer to the shoulder wound of Jesus.
Oh, great.
When he spoke to Saint Bernard.
I'm glad you brought this
But
up.
I don't see, do any of the stigmatists have that?
I'm so glad you asked this. Yeah. And I should make sure that I put this in my presentation and talk about it and not forget about it. Most interviews I do in this book, I mention it. She mentioned the shoulder wound of Jesus. Yes, many of these stigmatists have the shoulder wound. Anne Catherine Emmerich, her most painful wound was the shoulder wound. And it was the one that was the least visible. And she would tell people, they said, well, of all these, does one hurt more than the other? She'd say, yes, the shoulder. The shoulder wound causes me the most pain. And in one of her discussions with Jesus, Jesus said that was the wound that caused him the most pain. And is it not fascinating that Jesus says, if you want to follow me, pick up the cross and carry it? He doesn't say, if you want to follow me, feel my pain in the palms of your hands as if nails were going through it. No. He says, if you want to follow me, carry the cross, right? The shoulder wound. So it's quite profound that the shoulder wound was the most prominent for a number of them. And another that I didn't mention, crown of thorns. Therese Newman, you can see pictures of her online. She's bleeding like crazy. Down through her eyes. It's kind of scary to see the black and white photos. Another Italian woman from that same era, Giuliani and the others, St. Rita of Cascia, was gifted with a single thorn wound in her head, which bled all the time, continuously. And but a number of them have had the crown of thorns. And interestingly about the crown of thorns, those who have had it say that Jesus didn't actually have like a circular crown like this, but it was more like a skull cap that fit on the entirety of the top of his head, which would make sense because when the Roman soldiers went and cut from the rose bush and they took the crown of thorns and kind of put it together, they just pressed it on top of him. And I think in Mel Gibson's Passion, they press it on top, right, and the blood is pouring down. So it's not just around his head like a headband, but it's on the top of his head. So it's the entire head.
He had wounds there from the lashing.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole body was covered.
Right. Which is why I appreciate Gibson's The Passion more than any other of the films. The one by Franco Zeffirelli, Jesus of Nazareth, right, you guys, a lot of people here are old enough to remember the series in the 1970s. It was a beautiful girl who played Mary. Olivia Hussey, yeah, exactly. And they were, Franco Zeffirelli, they had an all-star cast. It was an amazing cast. Laurence Olivier was in there. Ernest Borgnine played the centurion. But who played Pontius Pilate in that one?
I don't know. Rod Steiger?
Yes, Rod Steiger. But when Jesus appears to Rod Steiger after the scourging at the pillar, I mean, he looks like he's almost aglow with a halo around him. He doesn't even look like he's really been scourged. Now, Gibson's The Passion, I mean, he is beaten to a pulp. And according to Anne Catherine Emmerich, when Jesus is brought back to Pilate, and this is in The Passion, Pilate says he's stunned, and he curses his soldiers and says, "I said scourge him, not kill him," because they had beaten him that bad. Some skeptics have said, well, Jesus died kind of quickly on the cross. It really shouldn't have happened that quickly. Well, after you're almost beaten to death,
And you can't carry the cross.
He can't even carry the cross. Yeah, because he's so beaten up. They almost killed him with the scourging. My wife had to leave the theater when they were showing the scourging. But I said, I'm going to stay and watch because this is what he really went through. And by the way, people think that Gibson was guilty of excess there. No, man, he held back. They only last like 7 minutes on film. In reality, I mean, they're ripping off the skin off his body with all of these instruments for like an hour. I mean, the suffering he went through is incredible. Have you guys read Anne Catherine Emmerich's book that I'm referring to? Read the account of the agony of the garden. That's really... Now, we don't know that's called private revelation. So the church doesn't say, you need to believe every word that Anne Catherine Emmerich says in that book. They don't say that at all. But it is said that Jesus suffered more in the agony of garden than anybody else in all of history. And you have to ask yourself, well, how? Why? If all we know from the Bible is that he's there, you don't quite get it. Her book provides the answers to that. He's seeing before him, like in a vision, every evil thing that every person has ever done, all rolled into one. And that's what he's suffering so much that he starts bleeding from his pores, from his skin. When he comes out of the agony of the garden, Peter and all the others are just crushed because he already looks like a bloodied mess. And that's before they get him and arrest him and take him away and then scourge him and everything else. Other questions? Yes.
Since you brought up movies, have you seen any of The Chosen?
I've seen some. My wife and daughter, Gianna, are addicted to it. So they watch it. They watch it a lot. I've seen a couple, and I could take it or leave it. And I feel like they're taking so much license with it. I mean, it is like Peter and his wife bawling about their infertility and everything, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. But what I've seen I like, and I think it's largely good what they're doing. So I don't mean to sound critical, but my wife watches it, yeah, and they just went to see it in the theater too. She and my daughter a few months ago, yeah.
Is there any Protestant accounts of stigmata?
Yeah, hardly any. And so my Protestant stigmatists. And there's a guy who's Lutheran. There's another who's Anglican. I mentioned them in the book. But the vast majority, 99+%, have been Catholics. And now I know that some evangelicals will say, well, okay, there you go, then it's not real. That's these Catholics who, wake up in the morning and see the Blessed Mother in their coffee, right? Right, they swirl their cream and there's the Blessed Mother. It's Catholics, right? If it's real, why don't us Protestants have it? Well, maybe because you guys don't, do the suffering thing like Catholics do, right? I mean, if you're one to say, Christ's suffering on the cross is sufficient. You don't have to be a living sacrifice and unite your suffering. You don't have to offer it up. Why do you guys have the corpus on your cross? The cross is empty, brother. He's risen, right? Well, if you come from that whole health and wealth theology gospel, you're not one that Jesus is going to come up to and give you a signal. Maybe wants to punish you, right? But if you're somebody like Gemma Galgani who says, oh, Blessed Mother, thank you for visiting me. Please tell Jesus that when I die and go to heaven, I can't wait, right? I will suffer with him in heaven too, right? And she's like, oh, my dear, there's no suffering in heaven. It's just in this world, no more. Oh, but I want to suffer for Jesus, right? You don't run into that in kind of evangelical circles, right? Creflo Dollar doesn't talk about that. And my buddy Joel Osteen doesn't talk about that, right? So he's out on the golf course rather than, Mother Teresa once said to a priest friend who was being sent off to be a missionary in the Soviet Union. He's getting on a plane and he's like shaking. He's so nervous. And she said, what's wrong with you? What are you shaking for? He said, well, frankly, Mother, I'm kind of worried about going over there and getting killed and dying. And this little 4'8" Albanian nun says, toughen up. I've been praying to be a martyr since I was 9 years old, right? So, but that's not the kind of thing that you hear in the health and wealth gospel. But they should read their Bible, because Paul says, offer yourself as a living sacrifice, right? To Christ, right? That theology is all in Romans. It's in Galatians. It's all there. If you want to follow me, pick up the cross. All right, very good. We'll stop it there. And then I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.
Yes. And I know a few of you are going off for graduations, as we've heard from dozens and dozens of CUP members that weren't able to join us. So I'm thankful for our CUP members that are joining us live on YouTube. I'm glad you were able to join us. Can we thank Dr. Kengor again for an enlightening presentation? And he'll be back with us tomorrow, and it's all about Marxism, wokeism, but also on a very positive note about how the church has fought against communism, and all about a pope, John Paul II, Reagan, and one of my favorites, Fulton Sheen. Oh, I can't wait to hear that. So we're grateful for his time and his wisdom. And as we wrap up, I just want to thank again our volunteers, Northside Event staff, for making this very successful. We're always looking for volunteers for our events. So if you're interested in helping with our events, I've got my business cards up here. As you exit, conveniently, you can take a card and email me on that. And before we close, we've got a prayer card. They're all the same on your tables. Let's pray the divine praises together. Could we have Father Tommy? Could you join us? Boy, this was really nice that you could be with us tonight. It's way better if you're doing this than I am. Some laity doing the divine praises, it just doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Carry the weight. Thank you.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All together, blessed be God, blessed be his holy name, blessed be Jesus Christ, true God and true man. Blessed be the name of Jesus, blessed be his most sacred heart, blessed be his most precious blood, blessed be Jesus in the most sacrament of the altar, blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, blessed be the great Mother of God, Mary most holy, blessed be her holy, immaculate conception, blessed be her glorious assumption, blessed be her Mary, Virgin and Mother, blessed be Saint Joseph, her most chaste spouse, blessed be God and his angels and his saints. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
And if you haven't had an opportunity to get his books and have Father, I was just elevated. Oh my gosh, I just ordained him. Dr. Kengor, sign that. Now's your opportunity to do that. And obviously, if you're here tomorrow, there will be a book signing tomorrow. And don't forget, get your cup shirts and your blessed candles in the back.